Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And as always, I'm always scouring the globe for entrepreneurs, business leaders, thought leaders, and I'm happy to welcome Larry Apke onto the show. He's from San Francisco and he's a VUCA consultant, which we'll talk about what that means. And he's helping companies not only survive, but thrive in a world increasingly that's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. He's also a influencer. He's got a nonprofit, which we'll talk about. And I'm really happy to welcome Larry to the show. So welcome, Larry.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited to be able to speak with you and hopefully provide some insight and help to your viewers and listeners.
Yeah. One thing that really struck out to me, recently I just got back from Austin, South by Southwest, and there's just so much people thriving in this day of volatility. People are taking control. And so talk about this idea of why change is so hard, why people are just kind of still struggling after COVID. Just know like COVID kind of poured cold water on everybody, but still people are still struggling. Talk about why change is so hard.
Well, change is hard because we've evolved not to change. It's interesting as we talk about this. I started reading the book *Sapiens*, and if folks aren't familiar with it, talks about it. And we've gone through, literally, thousands, if not millions of years of evolution, depending on where you want to, put the stake in the ground, of living in a world that was rather simple. And as we as a species have evolved to be social, what we've done is we've created these very complex webs of interconnections. And because of those complex webs, our world has changed. It's VUCA, right? It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But we haven't really evolved for that world. So it takes a lot of effort on our part because our default is to try to operate and assume that the world is, simpler than it is. So change becomes very, very difficult. Plus, the stories that we tell ourselves, we have this wonderful ability to kind of fool ourselves through all these biases, specifically cognitive biases that keep us where we are. So we have to fight against those things that come to us naturally.
Yeah, I love that. And kind of someone was describing it to me as, humans were are this, highly complex evolved species running on reptilian hardware or software. We're just kind of, we've developed these fantastic neocortex that allow us to like plan and strategize and thrive. But kind of our reptilian brains have, we're still, instinctive creatures. So this leads to you created a high impact, low cost nonprofit, and you're doing work with that. So describe that and how you came to do that and what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's a great story because one of the things that I've done in my career is I had this hypothesis that if we gave people a little extra knowledge in certain areas, it would kind of help them to find work. It would help them to kind of upskill themselves. And I'm not the first who's had that, but I put it into practice by teaching what I knew, which was Agile and Scrum. And I created this class and said, hey, if I had, people in my class, what would I teach them? What was important? Can we get them certified? Can we get them jobs? And I started with 7 people in a small room in Sunnyvale, California, up here in Silicon Valley. Of those 7 people, we got them educated, we got them certified, and we were able to get like 3 or 4 people jobs within like the first month after taking the class. And I knew I was on to something. And so I continue to do that for some time before a friend of mine, who became the co-founder of what we called the Job Hackers, which was a nonprofit, said, Larry, he was a CFO for a company. He said, if I'd taken your class years ago, I would have been able to save some of the companies that I worked for. It has a great impact. You should be doing this for a living. And so we went back and forth and we eventually created a nonprofit. I don't know why I created a nonprofit because I had no experience with nonprofits in the past, but I just knew it had to be about the mission and not about making money, which was a good thing because we really didn't make a whole lot of money doing the mission. And so I ran the nonprofit and gave the classes for about 7 years. And during that time, we trained over 4,000 people in over 50 countries because when the pandemic hit, we went completely virtual. We got so many people certified. We got so many people, the ability to upskill and get better jobs And I did that for a very, very long time, in addition to my day job, and being a father and husband and all that other stuff that goes along with life. And so in May of last year, I decided to step down and walk away from it. But I've always believed in creating something that outlives you. It's that concept of when is the best time to plant a tree is today, 10 years ago, but today's the next best. And build something that lasts. And so the nonprofit, the Job Hackers, still goes on. It still continues with its mission. And the interesting thing about it is we delivered a huge impact. If you think of all those people we did, it was like $6 million worth of training or more that we gave away for free. We did that on a budget of about $10,000 a year, which can get you, maybe a small one-bedroom apartment in this area. So we're able to just, do so much good for so many people on such a small budget. But that's the kind of thinking that I bring to other companies in my day job in this VUCA world. And that's why I call myself a VUCA consultant. How can we take advantage of these things and do more for less?
And coming from one of the most innovative cities, very progressive cities in the world, kind of home to some of the world's most valuable companies. You also talk about what is a cow. I'm curious, and why should companies consider having one? What is that?
CAO.
Yeah.
And CAO stands for Chief Agile Officer. So many, many years ago, I wrote a blog about this. And the reason it came about is back in the old days when electricity was new, it was a game changer. And people used to hire, and this is lost to history, but you'd find very few references to it. But if you Google it, you might find it. They hired chief electricity officers because it was so important to understand how electricity changes what you do. And it's really interesting today because I just saw an article this morning that Morgan Stanley, I think it was Morgan Stanley, or one of the banks hired an AI, a chief of artificial intelligence, which I think is going to happen more and more because these are game changers. The chief electricity officer doesn't exist anymore because we all know how to use electricity, but it was important at the time. And I think it's important for a chief agile officer because the folks who understand agility, agile is a loaded word, but I'll talk about agility, the ability to deliver value quickly in this VUCA world. They're very valuable to an organization. And in my mind, they need to have a higher position so that they can help guide a company in this VUCA world to do a better job. So that was the concept of the Chief Agile Officer. And when I worked for the nonprofit, that was my title, was Chief Agile Officer.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And a lot of companies are coming out with like chief creative officers and just kind of I believe I heard of the term chief futurist officer and kind of preparing the company and organization for what's to come. So the next question I have is one thing is as the CAO, how do you integrate agile principles at a strategic level and kind of talk about how the CAO fits into the role of existing management or the C-suite currently?
Yeah, I always viewed it as a kind of a mentor to the C-suite and to the organization. In my decade plus of experience of doing this at some very large companies, names that you would recognize, household names, and trying to do agile transformation, I've come to certain conclusions that I loosely hold, but I think are true. One of them being that if you're going to make any kind of organizational change, you need to have a critical mass of folks seeing the world differently. I think that's a lot of what it is. We have evolved as we started this conversation about evolution, human thought evolution. We've evolved to see the world in certain ways, and they're beneficial to us, but they're not optimal. And so if we can take different lenses or mental models and apply them to the world, we can do better. We can be more optimal. I don't want to say right or wrong, good or bad, because that's not the way the world works now. This is a VUCA world. There's no guarantee of success. It's not deterministic. It's non-deterministic. But to be able to see the world in different ways is hugely powerful. And our ability to actually be optimal, as I say in my literature, to thrive in this VUCA world, not just survive it, like it's something that we have to overcome and then everything is going to get back to normal. It's just, there is no norm. I mean, everything's always going to be changing, and the pace of change continues. And when we look at AI and the disruption, we don't know what the disruption will do, but we know it will disrupt. There are certain ways that we can view the world that will be beneficial to us. And that's what somebody needs to bring. And they need to bring it to an entire organization, which is why I'm saying they need to be kind of at the top of that organization.
Yeah. And being a CAO, because again, you're from San Francisco, and what sort of resistance do you see from, legacy positions? Are they embracing the CAO? Are they kind of integrating it? And what's going to happen to companies if they don't have a CAO or a CVO, CF, all these different positions that propel the organization? How is that position being viewed as?
Well, one, I don't think I'm getting a whole lot of attention on it at all. Because I made I made this blog post and this suggestion, and I'm not the only one now over history who's done it, but I think I'm probably one of the first. This was about 10 years ago or more that I made this suggestion. And it's not something that's really caught on. And I think there's numerous reasons why it doesn't catch on. But one of them is that we don't have to fear failure, what we sometimes refer to as failure. There is no failure. There's just feedback, right? The system doesn't care about you. So the things that we label as failure, those make it easy for us to change because we realize something's wrong. The thing that really hurts us in the long run from being optimal is what I refer to as soft success. We say, hey, look, I'm making money. I'm doing okay. Therefore, I don't need to change. There's a problem with that. It's like a ticking time bomb. Because, I sometimes explain to people, I said, you don't have to be the fastest gazelle on the plane, but you can't be the slowest. So if you don't change and you don't keep up with the times and you don't start to understand that the world has changed and you don't adapt to the new world, eventually you will be that slowest gazelle. I mean, what's been really helpful for a lot of organizations is that there is resistance to change kind of across the board, which means that you don't necessarily become the slowest gazelle. It happens when other places of the economy disrupt you. Think about financial services. It's all ones and zeros. Nobody goes to a physical bank anymore, right? So who's going to disrupt the financial services companies? It's going to be tech companies. And that's who they should fear. They shouldn't fear other financial services. They should fear the tech companies coming in and basically encroaching upon what they do. I know from experience that if you look at financial services, which again is technology these days, there's a lot of folks who are agile coaches. I just don't see chief agile officers yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if we don't see them in the next 4 or 5 years, though I expect it will probably be eclipsed by chief AI officers because of what's going on with AI.
Yeah, your your response reminds me because every time I reach a milestone or a goal, I'm always thinking to myself, this is not gonna last. How long can I enjoy the fruits of my success before something else? And like I'm always planning for the next thing, the next, just always, disrupting yourself before you get disruptive. And the companies that really do that are gonna thrive, and the ones that don't are gonna fail like very quickly. And it's like in the past it was like 20, 30 years you could be okay, but now it's going to be like a year, a couple months, then you're gone.
And there's something, Chris, called the shift index. For those of you who want to Google it, it talks about how long do companies last. I believe it's in the Fortune 500, and that number, the number of years that they last in the Fortune 500 has steadily gone down over the years and will continue to go down over the years because of this fact that the world is VUCA, much easier to disrupt folks. And again, when you look at something like AI, which is really hot these days, the reason it's very disruptive. People can use AI to gain an advantage and leapfrog other companies who have not kind of jumped on board.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole talk about, this year AI is like over 1,500 panels and to everything from entertainment, music, film. And if it's just those three, think about, business and financials and all these, big industries, definitely it's gonna have huge impact, bigger than the internet. So one thing that you talked about earlier was this, you're nonprofit, you experienced significant change with a limited budget. So what key strategies would you recommend for maximizing impact with minimal resources?
Yeah, I actually, I'm happy that you asked that because I actually just wrote a book recently. I call it Apke's Golden Rule of Agile, focus on value delivery, and that's kind of about that. I think it's really about how. So this golden rule of Agile is basically, I said, okay, if we take all the values and principles and break it down to one thing, could we do it? The answer is you can't, but you can get close. And the golden rule is we deliver the optimal value to our customers in the shortest possible time. That's what we need to be able to do, right, in this VUCA world, which means that we have to be nimble. We have to be, look at feedback and move. And the way there is a very simple way that I teach in my book, and I also teach companies I work for to do that, which is basically to take all the things that we know we could do to improve our products or our lives or whatever, put them in what we refer to as backlog, which is basically a to-do list, and then assess them for relative value and relative effort, and then do those things when we can that have the highest value and lowest effort. It's all outlined in the book. I've given many talks and other things about it, so it's probably easy to find for your viewers and listeners. To that particular way of doing it, it's very powerful for companies. I've done it for companies that are household names. They never did it before, and it always opens their mind up to possibilities they didn't see before.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is talking to people from the nonprofit sector is they're actually viewing the nonprofit as a business. They're bootstrapping, just like founders bootstrap their businesses. A lot of nonprofits, they bootstrap, they try to get the maximal impact with, the least amount, leveraging technology, building in as opposed to just, being just, misusing resources. Very fascinating. One thing as to end it all is talking about this. How does systems thinking contribute to successful agile implementation? What are some common misunderstandings? And then in industries resistant to change, how do you approach the culture of agile, especially when I'm specifically referring to is healthcare, education, financial services getting disrupted. So, but these two, education and healthcare, still are kind of very stagnant.
Yeah, let me start first with the systems thinking, why it's important. What has happened in this world of agile or agility is that we have a lot of folks who are promising really good things. You're going to increase your profits, your revenues, et cetera, and you can. It's not that you can't. It's a very powerful way of viewing the world. There's some powerful concepts, frameworks, et cetera, that are all wrapped up into this agility. The problem is a lot of companies aren't seeing it. And the reason that they're not is people are piecemealing some of these things into organizations without realizing that what you really need to do is optimize the entire system. So you can optimize a piece of the system, but unless you optimize the entire system and understand systems thinking, you might not get the result that you want. In fact, you might get a result that's counter to it. You might get worse as opposed to getting better. So systems thinking is really important. Theory of constraints, other things that I talk about in my class. The second part about culture is a system as well. And so again, I'm going to go back to, I think I alluded to it earlier, is to get that critical mass of people having these new mental models, mindset, if you will, and lenses with which to view the world. And so I have dedicated my life, because it has been so profound in others' lives, to doing this type of training, to helping people understand that there are different ways of seeing the world. And by seeing the world differently, we will think about the world differently. And when we think about the world differently, we'll act differently. The issue that you're having with education and healthcare is you have such a culture of we know what we're doing, that if somebody doesn't listen to what you have to say, I mean, what can you do, right? I mean, if you're not invited in to speak or something of that nature, it's very hard to get through. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make the drink. So I think a lot of it is just really finely ingrained, deeply ingrained ways of thinking, to the point where they shut off the possibility that there's something else out there. And I think people just need to know there's something else out there. They need to open their minds. They need to remain humble, and they need to remain open.
Yeah. When I talk to the younger generation, like the millennials, the Gen Z, they get it. They get it. They understand the world is changing. You know, they're talking about agility, what you're talking about, and preparing, and eventually shit's gonna hit the fan. So very similar to what COVID did. So fascinating discussion. How can people contact you, follow you, reach out to you, and check out your work?
Sure. There's a couple ways, very easy ways to do it. One is Larry Apke is a very uncommon name. I'm the only one that I know of that's alive. So if you type in Larry Apke in Google or LinkedIn, you're going to find me. I have a website that I've created for my training program. It's called the VUCA MBA, Mindset for Business Agility. So you can go to VUCAMBA.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You can link to me, connect with me, send me something, all kinds of different ways. So I'm pretty easy to find. That's the good news.
Yeah. Yeah. For all the audience out there listening, Larry for coming on talking about VUCA, as well as CAO. Be sure to give him a like and follow on social media. Check out his book. All these resources will be in the links and show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Chris. I had a great time. I hope it's helpful for your folks.